this morning out here now. You guys want your earlier. This is kind of like piggyback. So, how many of us are aware of Black Hebrew Israelites? You've heard of them? Aware? Never heard of them? Black Hebrew Israelites. What do you think about it? So today I'm going to be talking about them because they are a phenomenon that has taken mostly Black churches by storm, and like people by storm. A lot of churches are not prepared for it. So we have a lot of people with apologetics, and apologetics are based on atheism and all kind of worldview kind of stuff. But they were taken by surprise when this phenomenon of Black Hebrew Israelites hit. And they actually had, I don't know if were stolen, but they have corrected. There have been a lot of young Africans that have left church to join this, and they quit church altogether. And so churches were not prepared for this. They didn't see it coming. Now, so I've seen it first. So when I got involved with it, I was doing politics and came out of that. So I have a passion for cause and apologetics. So this came. So I want to give okay. So let's get started. So the origin of the Black Hebrew Israelites was founded by Frank Cherry and William Krause. They claimed that they had revelation, which they believed God told them that African American descendants of the Hebrews in the Bible. Okay? The lost tribe of Israel. So for me, two major red flags. Say through revelation, outside of scripture, number one. Number two, God told them the big one. So that's red flag. So Cherry established the Church of the Living God on the ground of truth, foundation, proud of the Church of God, same Christ, unites. During the following decades, people like some of them had no connection. So after World War I, there was a gentleman named Arthur Miller. And he was an immigrant from St. Kitts. He founded another Black organization, claiming descent from ancient Israel. He called it the United of the God. Similar groups selected elements of Judaism, adapted it in their structure, and created this kind of Black church with Judaism kind of hybrid. Okay. So the question is, I want to start, why did they choose Israel? Why this connection? And here's the answer. Go back to slavery. Okay? During slavery, a lot of the slaves had no hope. The one thing that they saw, they heard the stories in the Bible, was they related to the Israelites and how they were captive in Egypt and they saw the similarities with what they were going through. So, if you know, for example, Roosevelt, Harriet Tubman, what was her name? Called Black Moses, right? So they related to that story that much. So in doing that, they identified with the Israelites, right? So basically, in the late 19th century, saying they were biological descendants of the Israelites, right? And so what happened is they saw the discrimination, slavery, the things that they saw happen to Jews or Israelites. So then this became like they grew up in poverty. And that's kind of what happened. That's how it started. They believed God gave them a revelation that they were actually Israelites. But it came slavery and then identify as Israelite, and as soon as they just adapt to the identity due to the revelation. Okay? So that's why they chose Israel. So as this happened, the movement grew, but it was kind of like a small underground until the 60s there was a surge. Ahead of my slide. So, so we were the original larger group. We had Black Jews, Black Hebrew, and Black Israelites. So, for example, Sammy Davis Jr. was famous for being a Black Jew. Yes. Right? But he was not a Black Israelite. Totally different. That's why I categorize him. Black Jew, he said Judaism, he practiced Judaism, he knew it like adopted him, as opposed to like people say they are, and then the Jews today are fake. They're not real Israelites. They are fake. That's what they're impossible. So that's what they do. Okay? So in 1960, a man named Abba Bivens, he formed a Black Israelite school in New York where he taught that Jesus was Black and that Blacks and Native Americans were the true Israelites. After he was murdered in 1970, three of his students, Mashah, Ariyah, and his father, Jacob, they created a new school at 1 West 125th Street Park. Okay? And I want to so here's how it is. Okay? So Jacob claimed that he was in a bar in the middle. How this interesting because most of it, right? Look at the Mormon Mormonite, and he appeared, he interpreted, right? The New Age that's he don't appear to him and give him right? Saying, wow, I'm playing what they create appear to me today, right? So they always say that they'll think and give them this revelation, right? So you see this exact same. So they all do this. That's another red flag for me. When you're saying angelic beings appear to you and give you some revelation, always a red flag. So the three of them would name the school Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, or ISUPK. And you'll find a lot that they abbreviate the names of their organizations like that. So the ideological descendants of the school today are referred to One Westers. So people who come out of that organization today are known as One Westers because the original school was at 1 West, 125th Street in Harlem. So you might hear them refer to, oh, I subscribe to a One West theology. What their meaning is the teachings that came from 1 West, 125th Street in Harlem. So if you ever encounter them and you hear that term, that's what they're referring to. Okay? So similar to churches, they don't have denominations. They have what they call camps. But it's the same thing that we would call denomination. They call them camps. So they all have different camps. Their different camps have different theologies, different belief systems, just like a lot of denominations do. Okay? So some of the people that come out of One West theology that are really popular today, that are leading this charge, are groups like GOCC. They always use the initials, but it stands for Gathering of Christ Church. The GMC, Great Milestone Israelites. The IUIC, which is probably the most popular one, they're called Israel United in Christ. And then the one we already mentioned, the Israel School of Universal Practical Knowledge. Those are the most popular ones. Okay, these are the other two that I mentioned, Mashah and Ariyah. I'm like jumping ahead of myself here. That's a group picture of them. So you see how they dress. It looks like a movie or something, like they're characters in a movie. But they believe they're dressing like true Israelites. And this is how God told them they should be dressing. And they really believe this stuff.
Okay.
Where are they? Are they in New York?
So they're right now. There's the different organizations. They're really big in Texas. They're really big in New York. They're really big in Atlanta, Philly, and I just last year started seeing them in Detroit, downtown. Okay, so they're getting everywhere. So if you wanted to know, here's the group that I mentioned here. Those are the organization that I mentioned. Okay. I'm sorry?
I just said, wow, because my son he pretty much follows the Church of Israel.
Same thing.
And I've never heard of that before. So this is an education.
This is it. This is what he's into. So we're going to get into a lot of the beliefs in a moment.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
Have they codified everything into what you would call Bible or a document?
So so I'm going to get to that, but just know to answer your question really quickly, they oddly enough believe in the Bible, mostly the Old Testament, because they believe they're Israelites, right? And they have some warped stuff about Jesus, depending on which camp you're in. But they only subscribe to the 1611 King James. They think that's the only true version of the Bible.
What is 1611?
That's the year it was published. Yeah, right. So when King James authorized the writing of the Bible, we know as the King James Bible, the first publication came out in 1611. So for some reason they subscribe to that one as the only true Bible. Every other Bible is crap. Every King James after that is crap. The original one was the one. Okay. Now, not to digress here, but since you asked the question, I'm going to say this. I think it's hilarious that someone questioned him one time and says, well, you hate white people. You think white people, yes, they hate white people, but King James was white and you're reading a Bible that was authorized by a white king. Right? That's the irony. Their answer amazed me. You're lying. King James was black. And they put up this picture, looked like Billy D. Williams. They said, this is actually King James. Don't let the media lie to you. King James was black. And I was like, okay, this is going to rewrite history just to make it fit. But, so it's yeah. They got a Billy D. Williams picture of King James. Yeah, it's kind of weird. But yeah, it's kind of weird. But yeah, they do.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Uh-huh.
I'm just going to say it if you correct me.
Okay, please.
I'm understanding. They don't like white people?
We're going to get to that in a moment.
Is that?
Yes.
But, okay, and I'm not trying to personalize this. My son doesn't hate white people.
Well, I don't know what he's doing yet because I don't know. The organization he's with sounds like one of the organizations, and they have, how can I say? So like I said, different denominations, right?
Okay.
Some of them, they all don't believe the same things. There's some varieties and variations in what they believe and how they believe it, because some of them do believe that white people can possibly be saved when Jesus returns, but they're not now. Some of them believe they can never be saved no matter what. And they all have different beliefs when it comes to that. It depends on which camp they're in. So his camp, I don't know, because they're all so different. They can have some variations of it. And you know what? And find out, because he may be some derivative of Black Hebrew Israelites, some hybrid that's not exactly them. He could be, because it's just so much out there. That's possible.
It's like you said, though, it's like denominations.
Yes, it's different denominations, exactly the same thing. Some denominations speak in tongues, some don't. Some believe this, some don't. He could be just in a different denomination or a camp that has a different belief. Yes.
All these groups that you mentioned here, did these all split off from the original guys that founded it? Or?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
So that original group I mentioned, Arya, Jacob, and Mashal, those three, that once Abba Bivens died, those three guys had one big school, one big camp. What happened was, I forgot what year, Arya made a prediction that Jesus was going to return. And when he returned, he was going to kill all the white people. And the ones that were left would be slaves of the Black people. So when that year came and passed and didn't happen, he looked like a fool. So the other guy starts splitting and distancing themselves from him. So next thing you know, all these different camps start popping up. That's kind of what happened, right? And so the leader of Great Millstone, he was originally a part of this group, this leader, until he said something so crazy, they distanced himself from him. So he opened up his own camp. So the statements he made is on YouTube because he just made them within the last 10 years, 5 years maybe. It's on YouTube. He said he was on the street corner. You can watch it for yourself. He said something about in the kingdom, we get to have sex with 12-year-old girls.
What?
And so the guy was talking to him, said, are you seriously saying this? He goes, hey, when they start a period, they can have children, they're women. And he goes, and he looked at him and said, so all your brothers here, in your same group, if one of your brother's daughter's 12, she has a period, you allowed to take her and have sex with her? He goes, hey, he'll understand, because that's scripture. The Bible say we can do it. And he said, so you could just take a girl and have sex with her. He said, yeah, we're going to be able to do that in the kingdom. So some of the groups that he was with were like, dude, we can't support that. So he broke off and started his own group. So they all start splintering for different reasons like this, right? So they started splintering off. So to answer your question, they all kind of started here. Then for different reasons, they started splintering. Yes. You can see him on YouTube saying it. He sounds so ridiculous. It's like, really, are you saying this, dude?
Yeah, the founder, you had said it's like the late 1890s. Do these guys have any ties or association with Charles Taze Russell?
No, none,
Smith,
none.
L.G. Whitehouse, those were all kind of like.
None. Right. It's amazing to me, and I studied that one time, how that late 1800s, early 1900s, you had all these religious movements. So many of them happened, including Charles Seymour with Pentecostals, and help me out here. The church, we're in California. It's escaping me right now. No. Azusa Street. The Azusa Street movement that happened with the Pentecostal early 1900s. You had a lot of major movements happening in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Lots of them. I mean, so many movements happened during that period. I don't know what was going on in the world, but you're right. Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Black Hebrew Israelites, Pentecostal. You had a lot of movements that happened during that time period. Lots. So, yeah. Okay, any questions so far here, guys? It's kind of crazy stuff, right, to learn. Trust me, I know it is. It's kind of nutty. I know. Trust me.
I'm going to ask, can I take a picture of your notes? And my friend here is taking pictures.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Okay, so Black Hebrew organizations have certain common characteristics, which kind of she was asking me, actually. So there's an anthropologist, James Landing, author of Black Judaism, and he distinguishes Black Hebrew movements, and he refers to them in this way. He basically says that they don't necessarily depend on documented lineage to Jewish ancestry, nor does it require any recognized Orthodox or conservative views. So what he means by that is this. They will say we're actually Israelites, but they have nothing that connects them, is what he's trying to say. There's nothing. There's no lineage. There's no DNA connections. They don't have any paperwork. They have nothing, but they're claiming it without any documentation or any lineage, is what he's saying. All of them, the Black Hebrew Israelites in general, just all the Black Hebrew Israelites, they all are doing this. So let me get here. So Black Hebrew Israelite groups tend to define an Israelite as a descendant of the biblical patriarch Jacob. Okay, a Hebrew Israelite as the modern descendants in the ancient Israelites, and a Jew is a person who practices a religion of Judaism. So what they're saying is this: they don't consider themselves Jews because Jew is just somebody who practices just Judaism. What they're saying is they're the actual descendants of Jacob. So they're true Israelites. And there's a difference between being an Israelite and a Jew who practices Judaism. Does that make sense? Okay. So their claim is that they're direct descendants of Jacob. Okay. So, and they do not consider Jews to be descendants of Hebrew Israelites. The Jews are imposters. They consider them to really be, what's the word? Help me out. Today I'm like so brain dead. I've been like, my brain is frozen. I'm just looking as you're like right in my line of sight here. So I'll ask you next. No, but they look at them as being part German. They speak Yiddish. They don't speak real Hebrew. They kind of look at them that way, right? So they're not looking at them as real Israelites. So they hate Jews because they're imposters, and Jews are trying to steal they believe they stole their land and everything. That's really their land. So this is an interesting group. They're kind of nutty. I'm not going to lie to you. So their leader, I believe it was Abba Bivens, created what he called the real 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? So if you look, here are the tribes. And he says, so the Negroes or the blacks come from Judah, Puerto Ricans, Ephraim, and he goes down to Cubans, the Jamaicans, West Indies, Mexicans, Haitians, Hawaiians, Samoans, Somali Indians, Panama, Colombians, Brazil, Dominicans, and North American Indians. They're actually the 12 tribes that these people are. So if you're European, you're white, you're French, if you're Jews, you're not a part of the 12 tribes, just these people. Okay.
I find it interesting that they include Hawaiians and Samoans, but nobody else from Asia or South Pacific.
No, they don't. Asians to them are like dogs. Yeah, their whole philosophy on some of this stuff is really warped. And yeah. So that's their tribes. That's it.
Now, do these Black Hebrew Israelites, do they worship on Saturday as opposed to Sunday?
They do the Sabbath because they believe that they're the real Israelites and they follow the law and they follow, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. I've debated with them before and that's come up. You're not real because you're not worshiping on the Sabbath. I said, but you're not real because you're not sacrificing animals like you're supposed to. Where's your altar? Where's the blood? Where's your blood sacrifice? So you're not following the law either. So please don't. And so when you want to pick and choose the part of the law, but they don't follow it either. So please. Okay. Where am I at in my notes? So interestingly enough, they consider, back then they used the word Negroes here, the blacks that came over here are part of the tribe of Judah. But here's what's interesting. They don't consider Africans to be a part of this. And that's what's interesting. It really gets complicated here. I've watched them on YouTube debate with Africans saying, we're not African. We're not a part of you. We're Israelites. We're from the tribe of Judah. We descend from Jacob. You're African and you're not one of you. And so they will go against Egyptians, Canaanites, Ethiopians, Babylonians, and they go against them. And I quoted one of the leaders here. He said this: to say all black-skinned people are Israelites is like saying all Asians are Chinese or all Europeans are French. That was his quote, one of their leaders. So just because you're black-skinned does not make you an Israelite. You're an African, but you're not one of us. Okay? So this ideology, I believe, I haven't heard them say this, but in all my studies of them, this ideology, I believe, goes back to the original slavery, where they identify with the Israelites and more not wanting to be identified with African slaves. It's like this is their way of distancing themselves from African slaves and say, we're not African, we're Israelites. So they've distanced themselves from that. Okay? So this is an interesting group. So they believe that the transatlantic slave trade was prophesied in Deuteronomy 28:67. Okay? Now, in 68, this is important because this is a core center part of their doctrine. This right here is a center part of their doctrine. A lot of it falls apart when this gets dispelled. Okay, so let's read what Deuteronomy actually says, and then we'll see how they misuse it. Okay. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening. In the evening you will say, if only it were morning. Because of the dread in your hearts and of the terrifying sight you will see, the Lord will return you to Egypt in ships by route that I said you shall not ever see again. There you will sell yourselves to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Okay? So what they're trying to say here is, when you talk to them, they say, well, who else went in ships? But the slaves that were brought over here, they were the only ones who were in ships. They were brought in servitude, right? So this is a prophecy about the transatlantic slave trade and them, right? But there's so much that goes wrong with this. Number one, he says, I will return you to Egypt. They didn't go to Egypt, they came to America. So then their argument is, Egypt isn't really Egypt. Egypt just means America. It's just that Egypt is really just a metaphor for America. Because in Exodus, Egypt is called, what is it called? They gave a term for it, the house of slavery or house of bondage, right? So they're looking at this, it's called the house of bondage. So what else was the house of bondage but America, right? So Egypt is actually a metaphor for America. We got that, how ridiculous that sounds, right? Obviously. So when I've talked to them and debated them, I said, well, wait a minute. But everywhere the Bible has mentioned Egypt has been actual Egypt, geographic Egypt, its own topography, Egypt. The Bible has never used Egypt that way. Okay, it's real Egypt. So I've gone through the whole thing with them with Egypt and where the word came from, how it was a transliteration of Hatubakar, I believe his name, is an Egyptian king or god. He's an Egyptian god. And Egypt is a derivative of his name, right? House of Batah. So it's an actual place. It's an actual person that's a transliteration of. So you can't make Egypt America. That's the first thing. Then it says, you will sell yourselves, but no one will buy you. We know they were sold. People did buy them. So it's a stupid argument that they're making here. In context, if you read the whole Deuteronomy, he talks about blessings if you obey. Then he talks about curses if you don't obey, if you read the whole thing in context. The major problem they have here, historian Josephus, Flavius Josephus, he wrote a book called The Jewish Wars. He was like a historian. He was actually there during the siege on Jerusalem in 70 AD. He wrote about in his book all of this stuff. This happened in 70 AD. He talks about how they took all the boys and men 18 years and older, the Romans. They took them and they sent them to their very provinces. And he mentions in his book, some were sent back to Egypt, the Jews, right? So this already happened. In context, if you read the whole thing, it's pretty gruesome. It talks about how they'll be starving and they will eat their own offspring. So it talks about that in Deuteronomy, right? In his book, his historical book, he says how the Roman soldiers destroyed all the food sources. They encamped around Jerusalem so they couldn't get more food. They were starving, dying in the street. He tells stories of women roasting their children. Okay? He talks about that in his book. So this stuff already happened. It already happened in 70 AD. So they're trying to claim that this is a transatlantic slave trade, but this is old stuff. It already happened. Okay? But this is a core doctrine for them. Any questions? I know this is kind of crazy stuff. If you never heard all this stuff, it's kind of crazy stuff. Any questions so far? Okay. Trying to think, do I really want to talk about this here? We may not need to. Okay, so these were some of the original main groups here The three that I mentioned here, the larger groups, from which a lot of the other ones are derivatives of. So a lot of them have adapted Old Testament customs, Jewish calendars. They celebrate the Passover, circumcision of their males. Someone asked, so they observe the Sabbath day on Saturday. They wear the clothing and the tassels. They have beards. They believe that they're following everything that God told them to in the Old Testament. Okay? Most Black Hebrew Israelites deny the Trinity and they deny the deity of Christ. Okay? For me, this is coming out Jehovah's Witnesses. One thing I've learned about cults, that's one of the key signs of a cult. If you didn't know this, they diminish the person of Jesus Christ. He's anything other but God. They diminish that. For the Mormons, Jesus and Satan are brothers. Jehovah's Witnesses, he's a God with a small g, but they diminish the person of Jesus Christ. That is one of the key signs of any cult. Okay. So this is a quote from one of them. We believe that there is a distinction between God and Jesus of Nazareth. In particular, we believe that God is the supreme being in the universe and that Jesus was merely a human being, a noteworthy prophet, but not God, which is similar to what Islam believes, right? It's similar. So to kind of summarize here, they believe that modern day Jews are Europeanized Jews, but they're not Israelites, as we said. That's a key thing. To answer the question earlier, just coming up now with my points here, is that they hold to the 16 James 11 as the only authorized version of the Bible. Some of them only hold to the Old Testament. Some of them have the Bible and the Apocrypha, the added books. Some of them subscribe to that as well. So biblically, so someone asked me that, that's what they subscribe to biblically. They believe that the time of the Gentile means the time of white Europeans. Okay. So some refer to them as Edomites. That's how they refer to white people. So if you see them talk about white people, they'll call them Edomites, right? And Edomites are descendants of Esau, right? So I don't need this here. So this is what I was just talking about here. Jesus was a prophet. That's how they view Jesus. I'm really ahead of my notes here. I want to get past this. So yeah, so they believe that they are descendants of Esau. So when we see Esau and Jacob, twin brothers, they believe that they are descendants of Jacob and white people are descendants of Esau, right? And Esau's descendants rested in the land of Edom, which is how they became Edomites. So they believe that they are the enemies, as the Bible talked about in her stomach, that they were at war. So they believe to this day they're at war with the Edomites, at war with white people. And so it's really crazy stuff. And so when I've debated them, some of the logic is so twisted. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Edomites are white people, okay? Okay, my nephew. What's so they're not. They look nothing alike, but they're still all black. Okay, not one of us is white, and one of us is black. Okay, so it's impossible to have twins, and one of us white, one of us black. But that's what they believe. They believe they're righteous, law, dietary restrictions, all that stuff, praise and read the good, keeping of the Sabbath. So this is kind of what they do. So they refer to Jesus
after the Messiah returns. Others believe that Gentiles can be grafted into the kingdom if they keep the law under the authority. Okay? Israelites believe both technical traditions clear state of mind, neither reality. They're usually part of sacred names. They believe in what's God's God. Or some other name. God's name is on all of it. They believe the spread the message. They are gathered and scattered from the light. They do not yet know their true answer and their character. And so, for example, when I talk to them, they will say to me, like, the one lost, you are the lost sheep, you're out here, and we're trying to work out. All you guys are all part of the tribe, but you don't know it's step, right? So we're trying out here to work to bring you back home. This is what they do. Okay? Okay. So their leader, Arya, one of the leaders I showed you earlier, he said he was in his home, in his kitchen one day, and a black man appeared to him in grace and told him that the Hebrew language being spoken by the Jews was a bastardized version of what real Hebrew. And this angel taught him the true Hebrew, Lashawan Kedach. And what you hear spoken today is really Yiddish, and it's not real Hebrew. Is what they do. So, for example, they have the whole system here of vowels and the way they have it all worked out. Really, whoever Ariana, they did a lot of work on this. I give them credit for the work they did. The way they used the vowels, and they had this whole thing done. And so, Lashawan Kedach means only tongue, only language. And so, they will take certain vowels and make it sound different. So, for example, when we look at Jesus' original name, it was Yeshua. They call him Yahweh. And that's part of Lashawan Kedach. They believe that that's how it should act. And so we have the only language. Okay. And they believe Jesus spoke Lashawan. Although that's, but when you look at some of the things that Jesus said and try to say it was Lashawan Kedach, it doesn't even match up when they say, when they speak language, it doesn't match up what Jesus said. And they usually point to me and say, Eli, about on the cross. And they say, see, you speak Lashawan Kedach, but you can't, they don't have E's in there. It's kind of weird how they have, it's really more. I mean, but it reminds me of being a Jehovah's Witness. They just make stuff work that doesn't even work. They just make stuff fit that doesn't even fit. To most of us, we use logic, it doesn't even work. But they have their own little people. Yeah. They do, but they believe in polygamy basically, and they believe that if you have a wife that won't accept religion, so over the years, there have been lots of false prophecies, lots of them. Over the year, I'm going to show you. So again, here they are in the womb. See how the depiction of it is? One of the babies is black, one of the babies is white. Jacob is a kingly looking man. Esau is an animal looking guy. So this is how they wanted to depict white people versus black people. These are descendants of Jacob. These are descendants. That's how they put it. And this is one of their things when they're writing that Jacob, Esau, the constant war. That's the picture. This is Genesis, we want. On the last slide. Was there a first on the last slide? Yeah. Oh, there we go. Stop. I might look at the white. Thank you. I might start over. That's so many scripts. There we go. Right there. No problem. Thank you. So oddly enough, they also believe in reincarnation, and they believe that some of their leaders were once John the Baptist, one of these once the Apostle Paul, and they have one. His name is Hezekiah, who believes that he was the comforter. He's actually okay. Yeah. I know. First, late 1800s, and it's gotten more warped, a little more radical from like the 60s on, a little more radical. And if you ever see them on YouTube, they stand on street corners, they dress like the pictures I showed you. They yeah. So you will see them on street corners like this, Philly, New York, Atlanta, like I said, now in Texas. A lot of them are right now, they're all over the place. And you'll see the gatherings where they'll confront people on the street like this. They will confront them. And sometimes they're horrible stuff they say to people. I was watching a YouTube video and they were speaking something with the white lady on. And she made a comment, this all sounds like it's so violent. And you say you believe in the Bible, and they stuff they said to her, you need to shut up. Like, well, how dare you tell them what the Bible says? White people don't even have the right to read our book. And then she said something else, and he told the guy, read the scripture, the Matthew, right now, read it. And the guy reads the scripture of the Venetian woman who asked Jesus to kill her daughter, and he said, it's not right to fool the children to the little dogs. And then he said, you see what Jesus thinking you white woman? You a dog to Jesus. That's when he referred to you as a dog. What is a dog? The dog is a bitch. Jesus thinks you're a bitch, woman. And I was like, that's what you got out of that? Jesus think white women are bitches? Like, that's what you got out of that? That's what they did. And I like watched the video, I was like, this is horrible. Like, they're just horrible. Like, horrible. And they stand with a bullhorn and they yell stuff. And you can't overtalk them. I know people who, he's pretty famous now. His name is Vocab Malone. And he's one of the experts on like reading the book. And he's a white guy. He does what he calls urban apologetics. So he's not afraid to go on the street corners. And he'll confront them by himself with 10 of them. And he'll go on right back at him. And he'll challenge them on everything. He knows all their language better than they do. He knows it better than them. He'll challenge them on scripture, doctrine, and they'll try to shout him down. He'll shout it right back. So I give him credit for that. I'm not trying to do on the street. And you got a bullhorn. I'm not. So vocab, I give him credit for that. He has a great book. His book is called Barack Obama versus Black Hebrew Israelites. The name of his book. Okay? And he titled it that attention because there was a Netflix movie about Barack Obama. And in the Netflix movie, there's a scene where Barack Obama is walking down the street as a college student in Chicago. He runs into a group of Black Hebrew Israelites in the movie, and he hears them shouting this crazy stuff. So he challenges them about the crazy stuff they're saying. And then he just looks at it and walks away. So he took that one scene. That's a great title of the book, Barack Obama versus Black Hebrew Israelites. So that's the name of his book, Vocab Malone. But it's a really good book. It's a really, really good book if you're interested in reading, more about it.
So based on the time, what's the name?
head coverings, they cover their head, longer outfits, as you would maybe think of an ancient Israelite girl dressed like. They're very domineering over the women. Um, yeah, very domineering. They're really hardcore people. So, so I did Don's show when we did Black Hebrew Israelites. I was telling this morning class this morning, I don't think I've ever seen that much hate mail in my life. I could not imagine being a celebrity or a politician. I'm just a nobody. And doing his show, I got so much hate mail on Facebook, my inbox, YouTube. I was like hated by everybody of this group. They attacked me, they challenged me. It was ridiculous. So I was like, yeah. They think that they don't fight, but they're not stupid. They don't break money. But I saw a video when they took a trip to Israel. I said, I don't understand it. The group of them went to Israel, and they were dressed like this, and they're actual Israel. And they're at some park in Israel, right? And they're like talking and like they're videotaping themselves. This is our land. And these fake Jews took our land. And all these Jewish people are in the park. And it's like, dude, you know you're in their country, right? And it's like 10 of them. It's like billions of them, right? You realize that, right? And they're just like talking. And then some forest, not forest, like a park ranger type guy comes up to them. I don't mind you guys, these people that do that for here with the children. Get out of my face, you little rat. Trying to steal our country. It's our country, you little rat. I'm like, you do realize you're in another country, right? And they'll be like, listen, and you don't have rights in another country like America. You do realize that. But they're brave. I can't believe they went to Israel. This is our country, little rat. Don't tell us what to do with our country. Yes. They think of like sin and salvation and things like that. Their perspective is more Old Testament. That you're made righteous by keeping the law. And that when Jesus returns, like I said, people in the Old Testament, they're waiting for the Messiah's return. When the Messiah returns, they'll be made right. Their enemies, the Edomites, will be destroyed or be slaves. Very radical views.
Now, what do they think about if they believe the Old Testament? Obviously, it ties to slavery being a motivation like that and coming out of the house of bondage like that. What about Adam Eve?
What are they about that? We were all basically the same. Yeah, so we got so recording. So to answer your question, so what they do is this.